Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Yes, my name's Mallery Quetawki. Let me introduce myself in my language. In Zuni, that is just introducing myself, and my clans. I am Badger clan and Child of the Turkey clan. As mentioned, I'm a communication and outreach specialist. My role actually started as an artist in residence with an environmental health program, and it just led to, furthering how we communicate to communities, specifically indigenous communities living amongst abandoned uranium mines and other environmental health issues. And so not only have I been using art, but there's all these, layers of how we communicate both visually, orally, with these communities. And so today I'll be talking about how that journey began and where it's at. And this should have been my first slide, but this is kind of like my life map real quickly, who I am. I have my degree in biology. I'm actually also currently a master's in public health student at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Trying to further along how much farther I can take this type of visualization and science communication. And so just a few things about where I'm from, give you the context of why it is what I do. I'm from Zuni Pueblo, or Shiwina, which is one of the 19 pueblos of New Mexico, one of the 23 tribes. And we're the furthest west, and we actually have land in Arizona, so both New Mexico and an Arizona tribe. Some fun facts about Zuni Pueblo: we were one of the very first North American tribes who were in contact with the Spaniards in about 1540. We also took part in the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. We're coming up on its anniversary on August 10th. And I'm from a very, I guess you could say, I was raised very traditionally as modernly possible, to the ways of the Western world, but very rooted in my cultural heritage. And speaking of that heritage, this is why I art. I'm very immersed in everything that Zuni shares with our generations. We share from young to old, and it's passed down not just through storytelling, song, dance, but specifically through the way we express ourselves with art. Every symbol, every color, every shape has a meaning. All colors are represented by the directions. There's a meaning for each direction. There's an animal symbolic of each direction, and we recognize 6 directions: north, south, east, west, up, and down. And so traditionally, my family, I'm actually the oddball out. I do come from a family of artists, but they're all jewelry makers. They make really nice jewelry things that I have failed immensely in when I tried. Quickly fired the day I tried to burnish one of my mom's cuffs like that, and I guess I grinded the stone down too far and it was ruined. And never did I pick one up ever again. I did, however, become a painter. I am more of a traditional acrylic artist, and I also do pottery, which I'll also share a bit of it later. But I want to get to the actual start of why I do science communication using art. It actually happened really accidentally. It really wasn't on purpose. But back in about 2007, I was an undergrad, and I was studying both biology for a future in medicine. I wanted to go to medical school to be a physician. But the science courses were getting really heavy, and I always balanced it with a science class. But both started getting heavy. I had a advanced art class that needed a portfolio. I needed to develop myself as an artist somehow, and I said, well, I need to study for anatomy too. So let me just do this. Let me just throw some body parts, put some symbology. And actually, I had an issue to address with these series of paintings. These are all pastels. They're about 22 by 28 inches roughly. They're overlaid with India ink and white acrylic. But what I was addressing was I did some undergrad research for a couple years out in the Oakland Bay Area. And when I left my village for those few years, I had a bit of naysayers saying, oh, she's been assimilated, she's gonna forget who she is, she's gonna forget her language, she's gonna come back, you know, very city-like and no longer gets her feet wet or her knees dirty from, you know, the life ways of our people. And I took real great offense to that. And I'm really aging myself, but I could have gone on MySpace and really let them have it, you know. Just, no, actually put it all in here. And so the reason why I labeled this series, What Makes a Zuni, is to rebut those sayings, is that when you open me up, when you look all the way down into my veins, into my bones, within my arteries, I'll always be Zuni. You cannot undo what has been created. And so everything is etched inside of us, down to the spirit, down to the flesh. And so that was my rebuttal. And I didn't really think that one day it was going to take this, create a shift in my community where we rely on one clinic for about 13,000 of us. It's the Zuni IHS hospital, very underfunded but also very underutilized. Our community still has some distrust and fear of going to the doctor. Part of the reason why I wanted to become a physician was I didn't understand why our community members waited so long. They were getting sicker and sicker. You know, diabetes, you know, wasn't just, you know, checking your sugar every day, but people were losing limbs. People were going on dialysis, you know, as young as being in their 20s. And I know there's a very high rate of kidney disease and diabetes in my community, but I always wondered, why couldn't they catch that early? What can we do? And by listening to physicians who said we need to promote, you know, health, different health education, we need to do proactive healthcare and have people more involved in the course of their health journeys. And that was a dialogue they had a hard time developing because of the language barriers. The language I just spoke to you at the beginning, Zuni, is a language isolate. Nobody else in the entire world speaks it but us. And also cultural barriers. We're considered one of the most traditional and pretty much intact communities, Pueblo communities. So we have about, you know, a good chunk of our traditional customs and beliefs, and plus we remember things, historical trauma. We remember the Havasupai incident. We remember when our biological samples were misused. We remember the Tuskegee studies. We remember how institutions have abused minority and vulnerable communities. And so I didn't know that these paintings were actually gonna kind of break that cycle by having some of my community members, and this is an actual conversation a physician had with me. He said, like, I actually have people coming up to me. Now they came up to me and they asked, is that what my stomach really looks like? Is that what's going on in there? Because that looks cool. Is that healthy? Is that a healthy gut? Is that a healthy heart? Yeah. Yes. How do I keep it that? How do I keep it like that? How do I keep it that cool looking? And so these conversations started, and doctors were like, wow, you did it. You did it. What did I do? I had no intention. And then add about 10 years to this timeline, and I had the director of the Community Environmental Health Program come by and see these paintings after a meeting she had with some local, another indigenous community, the Navajo Nation nearby, about the studies that they were doing on their lands regarding abandoned uranium mines and exposures to mixed heavy metals. And they asked, you know, we appreciate your science. Thank you for doing this. every time you come out and share your science, you have no idea what you're saying. How can you help us understand? So she asked, how can I help you understand? Give me pointers that we can, make this work for everyone. And they say, we're visual learners. We learn through hands-on activities, maybe if you share art. And lo and behold, she saw this series about a couple weeks later, and now I create art that speaks to community regarding different environmental health, different health aspects, and environmental science to the communities that we work with. These are one of the 3 most popular pieces that were created, one of the first 3 actually, trying to help the community understand DNA and what's occurring when they're exposed to mixed metals. So DNA damage, DNA repair, and DNA as a whole. And what I've been doing has been using different tactics. So like people ask, how do you come up with this stuff? And being that I grew up in the way that I did, every time I sit in a seminar, every time I sit in a report back, every time, I hear our PIs and our scientists share their science, I sit there and I ask, like, how am I going to tell my grandmother this? She's almost 90 years old. She's, her English is okay, but she has 8th grade level education. How would I tell her what I do at work? How would I tell her about uranium and its hazards to human health? And on the flip side, how would I tell my children this? At this time, they were just entering middle school when I started working for UNM. And, I would go home and say, hey guys, what do you know about uranium? And what do you know about radiation and the atomic bomb? And, they're like, a bomb? But, this is just some really technical, heavy information that we work with. And so I really have to go and dig deep into my roots and to the communities that we work with and think of how they see the world. How is their worldview? What do they think of their environment? How are they related to their environment and to each other? And all Native communities are not a monolith. Everyone is different. There may be 19 pueblos in New Mexico, but each 19 pueblo is very different. And so all this information that has to be disseminated for them really has to be tailored for each specific community. And so as the artist in residence, I tasked myself with 3 goals: is to translate the science to the best of my abilities, collaborating with researchers and PIs, bridge bidirectional communication. We don't want to be just talking at community, we want to be talking with them. But also, on the flip side, we want to make sure government entities and policymakers and different heads of government are involved in these conversations. And we also definitely want to create that inclusive environment for the community and build that trust and sustain that trust that's been broken several times over by other institutions. And so just a note on the reasons why I have this color palette. You might have started noticing I have like a really, turquoise heavy color palette. So a lot of Southwest tribes, we don't bring up bad news or ill-fated news, death, dying, war, chronic illness to conversations. That's something to be had after dialogue. It's not something you start talking about. We can't just go into a community and say, you guys could have cancer. You guys are irradiated. Here's breathing this stuff in. We don't talk like that with community. Our science goes down to that cellular level, and we have to talk about what happens when, oxidative stress occurs and, reactive oxygen species starts breaking DNA. We don't want to have to sit and talk through the whole textbook situation on what that looks like. But we also have to include the healing aspect of it, the positive parts. And so positivity, telling the community that our bodies have a natural way of repairing DNA. And I've established how I talk about DNA. It's beads on a string. We wear necklaces. Everyone has a whole different set of necklaces. Everyone's is beautiful, everyone's is unique. And I talk about it like a strand of DNA. And that when this hem breaks, we don't just throw it away. We find a way to repair it. We find a way to fix it. The color turquoise for Southwest tribes is a protective stone. We wear it all the time. And we have it included in ceremony. And so turquoise is a very, big color in my color palette. So the way that I talk to community is basically through lived experience. Something I can't get a PhD in. I have to live it. I mentioned before, I come from a traditional community, and so everything that's been passed down to me when I talk to elders, it's all these things they already know. So it's called traditional ecological knowledge, or indigenous ways of knowing, or just ways of knowing, other ways of knowing. But TEK in itself is the lived experience of people who live really close to the land, who still utilize natural resources, and who have relation with the land, and including this holistic worldview where we are not individuals to just ourselves. We think of each other as an extension to one another. Even the clouds, the mountains, the water, we don't see ourselves separate from that. We are part of an environment. We don't have dominion over an environment. And so all our ceremonies, our language, our belief systems, our healing ceremonies are all tied to the land in many different ways. And so using those ideas, I also, creating this painting, wanted to promote those Indigenous scholars who've joined our leadership and who've joined research, our research initiatives to further for their own community, using both what they've learned on the Western end of science and bringing in their traditional knowledge to help either mitigate cleanup efforts or to find new ways to relieve these communities who are living still to this day in inadequate environments that are still contaminating air, water, and land. And so, as I mentioned before, I've established a few pieces with our communities, DNA being one, but the human cell being the other. So the wedding basket design with the medicine wheel in the center, I'm using that idea as the human cell, something we want to protect. That's why it's surrounded by turquoise, and each inside of each bubble is a animal totem or animal that we think of that has power and healing and protection. So the buffalo, the war pony, the bear has sweat lodges sitting on top of it and arrowheads, and the whole idea that it's protecting the cell from foreign invaders or invaders that could harm you. So much of these could be compared to macrophages and T cells and B cells in the immune system. And then what happens when the immune system goes against each other? When the bear and the pony and the buffalo start fighting. Autoimmunity, right? And so when we talk to communities, it's really difficult. They want to be diagnosed when we do our research, especially if we're doing human health studies. They want to be told, oh yes, you this is why you're sick, or this is the reasoning for your illnesses. But our science really goes down to a cellular level, where we could only talk about how exposure to metals has a disruption in immune function, and all the cascades that occur when these metals enter bodies and break up protein and break up DNA. And so it's been kind of a story map we've had to build over time, because we don't just want to rush in. We're not physicians, we're health science researchers. So there's a difference, and we're hoping that we can inform medicine. But the other aspect of the work that I do, putting a big thing on bidirectional, multidirectional communication. This painting is like the number one thing I like to talk about when we're doing cultural humility training. But we can definitely use this to talk to our participants on the Navajo Nation who are part of the Navajo Birth Cohort Study. It's a longitudinal study where we survey and look at pregnant mothers and their babies and until their babies are about 17 years old. And we follow them, we take samples to see how much metals, specifically uranium, that they're uptaking. Our studies have shown that babies are being born with uranium in their urine. The very first urine that they're doing the minute that they're born has uranium. So we can talk about placental transfer all day with these mothers and how they share with baby what they ingest, what they absorb, and vice versa. So that is a learning tool for that community. But on the flip side, to people who have never worked with Indigenous communities, especially policymakers who make these rules for us to live by, I need them to know, and brand new researchers who come to research on tribal lands, why we hold the land sacred. In both Pueblo and Navajo communities, when a baby's umbilical cord dries up and falls off, there's ceremony to return it to the land. So that's the placenta. And through this ceremony, we ask for the baby's strengths. We bury it in very specific locations, and we hold ceremony in very specific locations. And to, the unknowing person, an insignificant juniper tree or an insignificant pile of stones might hold some type of ceremony like this. So when we bring in new researchers and we say, please sample with care, sample with respect, because these ceremonies are held almost every inch of our lands. And this is to promise that one day we return to the land. So our umbilical connection to Mother Earth is actually never severed. We might be severed from our birth mothers, but not Mother Earth. And so that really instills how we are stewards of the lands that we live on. And so I really like to talk about that because there's so much more at stake when the natives, us, start, going against different environmental issues such as mining, fracking, and oil gas extractions. These are the reasons why. Land is very sacred to us. One things that I really, ensure that I try to do is that we include community in these conversations. Our research is actually very driven by community concerns, and anything that I make, most of the times when I sit in community listening sessions, I look at the crowd, and when their scientists are talking, I wait to see when people's eyes glaze over or where they just have that 1,000-mile stare, and it's like, yeah, we need to do something about that one right there. And so, and then I go to them and I ask, what wasn't clear for you, or how else can I make it better? And sometimes they reach out to me and ask me for something very specific, like this one. This one is actually housed nearby at MIT. It was created for the bioengineering department. They wanted me to help them describe the role of probiotics and prebiotics in gut microbiome health. And so using, again, the idea of beadwork and how putting all the beads together helps the community to thrive. So probiotics, prebiotics, everybody's working in a communal system here, using designs that mean growth and healing. So this is a community ask. And also just, making sure everything fits what our communities are living with. I'm actually not too fond of using symbols and the icons you get from like Canva or just straight off the internet. I want it to be tailored. I need it to look like something the community can understand and appreciate. So these are our conceptual models for our science programs that we have. And then the way we report back to the community, I like incentives. I like pretty stuff. My people like pretty stuff. And so when we hand out what our research was, we always, put it with the art, and they're like really nice printed cards, and I should have bought some with me, but these prints, are very appreciated by our communities, but we always share why we're, doing our research, what we found, and the biggest thing, what does it mean for your community? Why are we doing this research? Because you asked and we have, looked into this. And so I've been trying to promote co-workers of mine, scientists, to kind of bring out that creative side for them. And some of them have taken on the challenge. And I've taken in a lot of our grad students and our trainees to try to implement this. Especially, we tell them, when you do your thesis and you're defending your research at, right when you're about to graduate, we're gonna have community there. So you're gonna have to talk to your committee on the science technical end, but you're also gonna have to talk to the community whose lands you've done this research on. And so I'm also a part of other studies. It's not just environmental health. I work in genome sequencing in cancer patients. It's the first ever study of its kind, and again, one of the hardest studies to describe to a community who has very big distrust in genetic research. And so again, using the idea of beaded necklaces, everyone's is different. Where does your cancer come from? We could look at every single bead, take it apart little by little, and what if one of these was black? Is that where your cancer comes from? That's why we need to look that closely. Or maybe you were missing a bead. Maybe that's where that cancer comes from. So we're gonna look further into it, and then in hopes to create more accurate precision medicine for Indigenous cancer patients. And so I think the biggest time that I saw that we had artists really come together, and I guess a true calling for some of us artists, was during COVID. I mean, I heard around that a lot of artists fell into a slump and they had a hard time creating, but I was never as busy as I was until COVID happened. Because there were no hours. We worked all day, all night, and that bit me in the rear later on. But what I learned from my community, when I went back home during COVID and I was standing in line to go into the store one by one, nobody was honoring distancing. Nobody was wearing a mask. People didn't seem to care. And I said, why aren't you guys listening? There's signs everywhere. And I pointed out, like this one here, and it was a big giant poster from the CDC that had those icons, that you just kind of pull off, that are supposed to be very general. And the gentleman said to me, because I'm not a stick figure, I don't know what that is. And I was like, and that's when I'm like, ding. Yeah. You're right. As reputable as CDC is, they have no idea how to talk to you guys. So yes, I went home and I started creating. I started making PSAs, started making ways for our community to start talking about it. And I was making this painting in real time. So when you actually see the original, you can see all the ghost marks in the back because I kept painting over it. But that's how the mRNA vaccine was created and how it recognized that spike and sent the message to the bear, the pony, and the buffalo to make sure that it knew its job when it should come in real time. So this is when it really hit me, and I started sharing with other artists. Indigenize. We have so many reputable sources out there, but they need help. They can't possibly think of ways to talk to every single community, every single pockets of this country, of this world. So that's where we have to come in. We're already storytellers, we're already visionaries, we're already record keepers, as what my community would call us. We keep records of our history through the rock paintings, the petroglyphs, the cave art. To me, that's a way of recording history and map making through our time and our travels and our migrations. And so I've also been a part of addressing behavioral health because during COVID, we were so worried about getting people sick. We were not thinking about how it was also making us sake. Because as holistic people, we see things not just for the physical and mental, but spiritual. We were not only mourning people we lost to COVID, we were mourning loss of ceremony. We were mourning to be told to distance. As Pueblo people, we do everything together. We laugh, we celebrate, we honor, and we mourn together. So to be told not to do that, that was already ripping at our culture right there. And so how do we talk about it? How do we address this? And so we did some teach backs for nurses and for counselors, behavioral health therapists with that. And just promoting this with our communities as well, as especially our students, visual note taking. I have a good friend of mine who's really good at this, and he's taken that twist of putting his Pueblo influence on how he does these visual brainstorms for our sessions. And I said I was going to share my pottery, so I put it here for scientific reasons because I have 3 reasons why I make mice. Someone asked me one day, why do you make mice? No one makes mice in traditional Pueblo pottery. And I said, well, for one thing, we have a story called The Boy Who Made Dragonfly, talking about how Zuni one day had a big bountiful harvest, and in order to show off, they had a food fight in front of all the other Pueblos, and people were disgusted with us. Our ancestors were disgusted with us, and they sent the mice in to take all our harvest back overnight. So they taught us about greed, taught us to share and to, not be boastful and not be wasteful. So mice can teach us a lot, can humble us. The Hopi tribe has many stories about the warrior mouse and about the size of a being and having that kind of might. But for the 3rd reason, I do it to honor all the mice and rats that have given their lives up for scientific research. And so I have these little critters that I honor. They're all used with traditional clay collected from the mesas around my village, as well as the paint. I still have not perfected how to outdoor fire them. I'm still learning. I have only been doing this since high school, whereas I've been painting since I was 5, so it's a big difference. But these are just some of the art, some pieces I should mention. I did the 2021 Google Doodle. It is a weaving game. It's still up there if you guys ever want to take a try at it. There's 3 levels you have to pass. It's a total of 9 paintings that I did for Google. It was quite the experience. And another noted art was I got my art blown up onto the wall at the Met a couple years ago. Still kind of living off that high. I don't know when I'll stop talking about this. I wouldn't have said anything. I would have just been like, yeah, I went to New York, but somebody there told me, they're like, do you know how many living artists have ever even shown at the Met? I'm like, really? Okay. I'll squeeze that as far as I can. But that was for a pottery exhibit. My pottery was not in it, but they put these 2 pieces there. This other artist is from Laguna Pueblo, who lives amongst these abandoned uranium mines. The Haven Solomon Chaffin's amazing artist. They put our art pieces in the front of this entrance to hopefully start that dialogue on environmental justice on tribal lands. And my favorite substrate is painting on wood, specifically skate decks. Real popular thing. I am from New Mexico. I do have to throw in the lowrider culture in there with the pinstripes and the gold leaf, and it already works with the way we do pottery. I do make sciencey, nerdy skate decks too for those that love to skate. I mean, I hope they're hanging on the wall and not grinding up the stairs right now. But yeah, this is one of my latest pieces. It's a mural-ish size, about the size of this thing here. It's I don't make very many political art pieces, but this one had to be made a statement because the is Mount Taylor in Zuni. It's a mountain in Grants, New Mexico, that has it's considered a sacred cultural property by 5 different tribes, Zuni being one of them. It's currently under threat of reopening as a uranium mine. And the people that we work with and partner with all live in the shadow of this mountain and have been suffering for years, since about the Cold War era, and they plan to open more uranium mines. So this is just a painting and homage to show how merciless this mountain could be. It is considered a dead supervolcano, but we don't consider things dead. We do believe in climate change. We believe in everything that the environment does and surprises everyone. It's not a surprise to us because Mother Earth can be merciless. And so, yeah, if you ever want to look me up, there's my handle, email. But yeah, thank you. That's all I have for you today.
Couple questions.
Well, so it's not a question, but so I have a friend who just did defended her for a PhD, and she talks about science identity. And so when you first started talking, I was like, oh, this is like a part of science identity, because the community is like, this is not like, I'm not a stick figure, like all of this stuff does not apply to me. And so by taking the time to like actually make sure you're communicating the things, like you're able to earn that trust. So it's a very timely thing. I'm like, oh, this is like a beautiful application of the framework that I just listened to. So this is amazing and absolutely beautiful, beautiful work.
Thank you.
Yeah. And congrats to me and the Med. Never
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I was just going to ask, you're currently at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Can you tell us just a little bit more, where are you in your schooling there? Is this a master's degree?
Yeah, I just started the master's degree program. It's fully part-time. I'm also a Bloomberg Fellow, so I did get the fellowship to do this while I work. And so my community environmental health program that I work with will be my organization that I'll do my capstone and practicum with. And so it is a really good program, and I'm hoping that, what I've learned in the field already, experience-wise, there's some, way that we can connect what I would get out of Johns Hopkins. And I'm literally a month and a half in, but I'm 5 classes down. It's pretty brutal. Yes.
So I'm from Arizona and know people in, especially like the Navajo and Hopi nations who have been affected by these uranium mines. So like, love seeing how that's inspired somebody to like go forward and like really change things. I was also wondering, do you like, so I know that you do a lot of work with community members and like ensuring that this like meets people where they are and like with their understanding. Do you ever do any work with like having community members also make art inspired by science and like give them any hands-on, like get them involved in like also making the art?
Yeah, that's I've been asked about that in doing arts and cultural stuff with and citizen science at the same time. So right now we're actually in the planning stages of doing a mural for the Quetawki village in Laguna Pueblo. And seeing what that looks like. I'm constantly bringing arts and crafts to any science fairs or feast days we have with them, and hoping to see the creativity come out. I mean, it's a difficult thing to talk about, and kind of like, in art therapy, it's gonna take a while for people to want to really truly talk about something this heavy, and using art, we encourage it, but right now the one thing that we did do already was we gathered community members, knowledge holders, undergrad students and graduate students, and mentored all of them together to create art. And there was a lot of poetry, there's storytelling, there's paintings, digital art, And there's interest on both sides from, you know, really rigid scientists and community, because they got a taste of science in a way they thought that, oh, I have to go to school all these years. It's like, no, you have a knowledge you bring too that informs our science. And so that's what I'm getting out of it, is when the community gets involved in whatever form they can, and through art, we're able to kind of guide our science in a better direction for them too. So I'm hoping to have more programs, especially for the little ones, and that's something we're working directly with tribes to get the permission to do so.
You have to communicate concept of data sovereignty, because that's a big issue. With your kind of key point of communicating these both ways. Like, talk about
Yeah, it comes up a lot. It really, truly does. Data sovereignty, data management, especially. I am very proud to say that the specific programs, the Navajo Birth Cohort Study and the Metals Superfund Center that I work for, community owns the data. We do not have ownership of it. Every time our scientists want to publish something, they run the drafts by the tribal council and by community members before we publish, before we mention their names in, you know, outside sources. For every new, you know, research that comes along, it's always vetted with the community before. And so that data is theirs. So, and even samples, biosamples we take, urine, blood, stool, we give the option to return it if they want it back when we're done. So there's a lot of cultural aspects that we take in. The one thing that I talk heavily about when it comes to research with biosamples is ensuring that we include the birds in when we talk about harms and beneficence, to actually mention spiritual harms, because that's not ever mentioned in regular consenting with other, you know, researchers or with other communities. And so there's a lot of aspects. There's still a lot to figure out. We're hoping that, you know, an Indigenous repository could be in existence so that these, you know, ways we work with communities would work better. Navajo Nation has their own IRB or their health research board. The Pueblos do not. So it's really hard to kind of navigate that, but we take the lead from the community.
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up. Thanks so much. It's wonderful.